The morning sun was just beginning to touch the tops of the city's tall buildings, casting long shadows across the wide park that stretched like a green ribbon through the heart of the bustling metropolis. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet grass from the previous night's rain and a faint aroma of roasted coffee from a nearby stand. Joggers passed by with steady strides, earbuds in, lost in their own rhythm. Dogs tugged on leashes as their owners tried to keep pace, and cyclists wove carefully through the crowded paths. Yet amidst the usual hum of activity, quiet presence settled on one of the weathered benches near the central fountain. She appeared almost like part of the scenery at first. A woman in simple clothes, not flashy or attention-seeking. With a scarf loosely draped around her shoulders and hair tucked gently behind her ears, she carried a small, battered case that looked like it had seen better days. People glanced briefly at her, noting nothing unusual. Then she carefully opened the case and pulled out a portable keyboard, setting it on the bench. Her movements were deliberate, almost ritualistic, as if she had done this 1,000 times before. No one came up to her. The city had trained its residents to move fast, to notice little and forget quickly. But then the first notes rang out. Soft, almost shy at first, like a voice testing the water before speaking fully. The sound was clear, pure, and carried through the crisp air like a bird's song. People slowed. The jogger halfway down the path hesitated mid-step, then continued, but slower. The man walking his dog paused, his gaze drawn to the melody even as the dog tugged at the leash. It was not music people heard often. It was not a tune they had read about in magazines or played on the radio. It felt alive, as if it had been pulled from a place inside the woman herself. Each note held emotion, an unspoken story, and yet it was perfectly calm, not demanding attention, just offering it. One by one, people stopped what they were doing. Drawn in without realizing it, a little boy on his scooter skidded to a stop, holding the handlebars tightly and turned to watch her. His mother, caught by surprise, stood still, unsure whether to call him forward or pull him along. The boy's eyes were wide, mesmerized. He had never heard music like this, and something in his young heart recognized it instantly. He whispered a soft wow, almost to himself. She didn't look up. She didn't glance at the small crowd that was starting to gather. Her hands moved over the keys with a fluidity that suggested long practice, careful attention, and deep feeling. The melody swelled and receded, rising with the sun as it climbed higher into the sky. Birds that had been chirping elsewhere in the park seemed to pause, their songs fading under the gentle insistence of the music. A young woman walking her dog stopped and leaned against a tree. Taking out her phone to record the performance, she spoke softly to the dog. Listen to this. It's amazing. Behind her, an elderly man with a cane shuffled closer, resting his weight on it as he found a spot on the grass where he could hear better. He smiled, something soft and long-forgotten lighting his face. The music seemed to touch a part of everyone that had been hidden under daily worries and routines. No one spoke at first. The notes themselves seemed to communicate something words could not. Yet in the silent awe, small murmurs started. A few whispered to each other, guessing at who she might be. Is she a professional? Maybe a student? Someone asked. Another voice responded, I don't think so. You can feel the emotion in every note. This isn't practice, she continued, oblivious to the curiosity around her. Her eyes were focused, her hands precise, yet gentle. Occasionally, she would close her eyes for a brief moment, as if she were remembering something far away. A woman sitting on a nearby bench with a book abandoned her reading. She rested her elbows on her knees and leaned forward, letting the music wash over her. Every chord seemed to carry weight, a mixture of joy, sorrow, hope, and loss, all at once. Some children from a nearby playground wandered closer, guided by the invisible thread of sound. They stood at a distance at first, shy, unsure if they should approach. But the music drew them in, and soon they sat cross-legged on the grass, quiet and attentive. The pianist did not smile, did not wave, did not acknowledge them. Yet they felt a connection, something intangible, yet powerful. The keyboard itself was modest, not flashy, not new. Its keys were slightly worn, and the casing bore scratches from years of travel. It looked ordinary, yet when she played, it transformed. The instrument was not just an object. It became a medium, a vessel for emotion and story. People who listened closely felt as though they were hearing a story unfold in real time, even though no words were spoken. The passerby who had recorded her performance quickly uploaded it online, thinking others should see this moment. Within an hour, it began to circulate. People tagged friends, shared the video, and wrote comments about the mysterious pianist in the park. "She is incredible," one comment read. "Who is she? I need to know her story." Another said, "This made my day." I cried a little. Despite the growing crowd and attention, the woman remained focused on her music. She seemed to exist in a world separate from the one rushing past her. Occasionally, someone would drop a coin into the small open case at her feet, and she would nod slightly in acknowledgement, but her attention never wavered. A young man offered a small bouquet of flowers he had bought at a street stand, and she accepted it with the gentlest nod, then continued playing. As the morning progressed, more people arrived. Drawn by curiosity or by the magic of the music that had begun to spread online, a group of office workers on their way to meetings stopped near the fountain, leaning on the low walls, listening in silence. Even the security guard of the park, making his rounds, paused for a moment, leaning on his bat. Unable to look away, some began to speculate. Perhaps she was a teacher practicing before her first class. Perhaps she was a struggling musician who had nowhere else to perform. But the truth remained unknown. She said nothing, revealing nothing beyond the language of her music. Each note was an open window into something deeply personal, yet universally understandable. An elderly woman approached, leaning on her cane, and whispered, "You play beautifully." The pianist's eyes briefly met hers. For a moment, a faint smile appeared on her lips, gentle and fleeting, then vanished as her hands resumed their movement. The elderly woman nodded, almost as if she understood the unspoken story behind the music. By noon, the park had become a small gathering place for those who had been touched by the performance. People sat on benches, on the grass, and even leaned against trees, not wanting to leave. The pianist, still unaware of the crowd's size, played on, her music rising and falling with an effortless grace. She played not for recognition, not for applause, but as if telling a story only the heart could hear. The city moved around her, the vendors, the joggers, the dogs, the cyclists, but, in that corner of the park, time seemed to slow. People were reminded of something they had almost forgotten, that beauty could appear in the simplest places, without warning, and touch them in ways they never expected. And all the while, she played, alone, yet surrounded, anonymous yet deeply connected to everyone who listened. Each note lingered in the air, leaving a trace of wonder, a hint of mystery, and a promise that stories could be told without words. For those who heard her that morning, the memory of that music, the way it flowed over the fountain and the paths, would stay with them long after she disappeared. The park had grown busier by mid-morning, and the mysterious pianist had settled into a rhythm. Her music continued to rise and fall like the gentle waves of a lake, touching everyone who paused to listen. People began to notice subtle details in the way she played. Her fingers moved with careful precision, almost dancing over the keys. Sometimes her hands would hover in the air before pressing a note, as if she were searching for the perfect sound. A man who had just finished his morning run slowed his pace as he approached the fountain. His breath was heavy, but he barely noticed. Instead, he focused on the music, feeling it calm the tension in his chest. He had been stressed for days, overwhelmed with work and family responsibilities. Yet this simple melody carried a strange peace. He found a bench nearby and sat down, letting the notes flow over him. Each chord seemed to breathe life into a part of him he had almost forgotten. Children who had wandered from the playground gathered in small clusters, quietly watching her. Their curiosity was mixed with a sense of wonder. One little girl tugged at her mother's sleeve, whispering, "Can she play like that all the time?" The mother smiled softly, brushing her daughter's hair back from her face. "It's special, isn't it?" Just for this moment, the girl nodded, eyes wide, captivated. Someone in the crowd finally spoke aloud, breaking the spell of silence. "Does anyone know who she is?" The question was met with quiet murmurs. A few people shook their heads, shrugging. No one had spoken to her yet. No one had even tried. The music seemed to exist in a bubble, separating the pianist from the world outside. And that made her feel all the more fascinating. People began taking out their phones, recording videos and sharing them online. Soon, the performance was being watched by others outside the park. Comments appeared almost immediately. "Who is she?" "This is incredible," wrote one person. "Her hand sheer music. I feel like she's telling a story," wrote another. The posts multiplied. More people decided to visit the park to see her in person. Despite the growing attention, she remained focused on the keys. She didn't look at the camera phones, didn't stop for applause, and didn't speak to anyone. It was as though the music itself was her only voice, and every note carried meaning. There was an unspoken message in the melody, a story that required no words, and those who listened closely felt it deeply. A young man who had been watching from a distance finally worked up the courage to approach. "You play beautifully," he said softly, unsure if he was disturbing her. She didn't stop playing, but her eyes flicked up for a brief moment. The faintest hint of a smile touched her lips before she returned to the music. The young man nodded, sensing that words were not needed here. He stepped back and let the melody speak. The crowd began to grow. People who had been rushing through their days stopped to listen, drawn in by the calm power of her music. Office workers on their way to meetings lingered, setting down coffee cups and leaning against trees. Joggers paused mid-step, feeling an inexplicable pull to stay. Dogs sat quietly next to their owners, tilting their heads as if they too could understand the music. An elderly woman shuffled closer, leaning heavily on her cane. She had heard the piano from across the park and had come to see who was playing. When she arrived, she stood in the back of the small crowd, letting the music wash over her. She closed her eyes and let the notes fill her mind. Memories she had long forgotten returned. Afternoons spent playing piano as a child. Laughter shared with friends. Moments of sadness that had once seemed too heavy. The music carried all of it, softening the edges of her memories and wrapping them in a gentle warmth. A young boy, no older than 10, sat cross-legged on the grass. He had watched her for nearly an hour, unable to tear his eyes away. He was fascinated not just by the music, but by her presence. There was something about the way she played that made him feel both happy and thoughtful at the same time. He leaned forward slightly, trying to understand how someone could make a keyboard sound like a river flowing or a wind rustling through leaves. People began sharing their feelings with each other. A mother spoke to the man sitting on the nearby bench. "Doesn't it feel like she's playing just for you?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "Yes. It's like she knows exactly what you need to hear." Nearby, two women whispered to each other about the music. "I don't know who she is, but she's amazing." "I wish I could do that. It's more than talent," the other replied. "It's emotion. She's pouring something into the notes." Meanwhile, the pianist continued to play, her focus unwavering. She occasionally closed her eyes, letting the music flow from memory, from feeling, from somewhere deeper than thought. The crowd sensed it. They felt that each note was personal, not just a performance but an offering. Some people laughed quietly through tears, moved by the beauty and unexpected emotion. Others sat in silence, staring at the bench as if they could see the story unfolding in front of them. A man with a camera approached, hoping to capture a closer view. "Excuse me," he said. "Would it be okay if I filmed you from here?" She did not stop playing, but she nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly. He lowered the camera and filmed, careful not to disturb her. Even in the recording, something magical was present. The sound, the movements, the quiet intensity, all of it carried a weight that could not be duplicated. As the morning turned into late morning, all people joined. Street vendors paused their work to listen, school children on a field trip gathered near the fountain, and even the park maintenance crew stopped to watch. Each new listener brought their own energy, yet the music absorbed it, turning the crowd into something unified by the sound. It was rare to witness a moment where strangers felt so connected to one another, yet here it was, unfolding naturally. One woman whispered to her friend, It's like she's telling us a story we can all understand without words." Her friend nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Exactly. You can feel it. Joy, sadness, hope. It's all there." They both stayed, listening as her fingers moved over the keys, creating new patterns, new emotions with each passing measure. Some children began to hum along quietly. Not words, just tones that matched the rhythm. Their small voices blended with the piano, adding innocence and charm to the already enchanting scene. The woman at the keyboard did not acknowledge them, yet her music seemed to welcome them, encouraging their gentle participation without overt recognition. The young boy from earlier finally reached into his backpack and pulled out a small notebook. He began sketching what he felt from the music, swirls and lines and shapes that tried to capture something invisible but real. The sketches were rough, almost childish, but they carried the same emotion as the notes that had inspired them. He looked up frequently, glancing at her hands, trying to understand how such beauty could flow from something so ordinary. Meanwhile, whispers of curiosity spread throughout the park. "Do you think she's a professional?" one person asked. "I don't think so," another replied. "You can feel the emotion. Professionals play with skill, but she's playing with her heart." People speculated quietly among themselves, but the mystery only deepened the allure. The woman remained focused on her music, revealing nothing but beauty. As the morning wore on, someone left a small bouquet of flowers on the edge of the keyboard. A few coins had already been placed in the case, and more arrived as visitors found their way closer. She acknowledged these gifts with a slight nod, but she did not pause, did not smile widely, did not speak. Her message was being carried entirely through her music, and the crowd understood this instinctively at one point. A man in his 50s, looking exhausted from work and life, leaned heavily against a nearby tree. He closed his eyes and let the music take him. For a few minutes he forgot deadlines, responsibilities, and worry. For a brief moment, the weight he carried felt lighter. When he opened his eyes, he saw others watching her in the same reverent way. People were crying quietly, smiling softly, and nodding to themselves. A shared sense of humanity had emerged, unspoken but unmistakable. Some people began posting photos and videos online. The mysterious pianist quickly became a small sensation. Comments poured in from people who had never even been to the park. "Who is she? I wish I could hear her," wrote one person. "This is pure magic," another said. "I can feel it through my screen." But no matter how many people tried to connect digitally, the real magic remained in the park. In the presence of the piano and the woman who played it, the woman never stopped, never rushed, never hesitated. Even as the crowd grew larger, she maintained her quiet focus. She did not play for attention or recognition. She played because the music demanded it. It was a gift, a moment shared, a connection formed through sound and feeling alone. Those who watched understood that this was something rare, something fleeting, something deeply human. By late morning, the park had become a small gathering place for anyone who had heard of the mysterious pianist. People came intentionally now, seeking the music, hoping to witness what others described as unforgettable. Children, adults, and the elderly all mingled quietly, sharing glances of wonder. Her music had created a space where differences disappeared, where every person was equal, united by the beauty of sound and the emotion it carried, and through it all, she played unseen and unknown, touching hearts one note at a time. No one could explain why her music moved them so deeply, yet everyone agreed on one thing: it mattered. It mattered more than the noise of the city, more than the rush of daily life. For those who paused, even for a moment, it was as if the world had shifted slightly, revealing a hidden space where wonder, connection, and beauty were real, tangible, and unforgettable. The park had become alive with anticipation, a quiet energy that seemed to flow from the fountain and wind through the trees. People gathered around the bench where the pianist played, their faces showing a mixture of awe and curiosity. The music had drawn everyone in like a magnet, but now, as the morning stretched toward midday, there was a new tension in the air. Something was about to happen, though no one could say what. The woman at the piano continued playing, her eyes closed, her fingers moving effortlessly across the keys. Each note carried emotion, sometimes a gentle sadness, sometimes a flicker of hope, sometimes a warmth that made the hearts of her listeners swell. People leaned closer, unconsciously holding their breath, as if even the smallest movement could disturb the magic. The birds in the trees had stopped singing, the wind seemed to slow, and even the distant hum of traffic softened. A small boy tugged at his mother's hand. "Mom," he whispered, "why is everyone so quiet?" She smiled, brushing his hair back from his face. "Because what she's playing, it's something you don't hear every day. It's like she's speaking to us with her music." The boy nodded, wide-eyed, listening intently, feeling something he couldn't name but understood. Suddenly, after what felt like hours but was only minutes, the pianist paused. Her hands hovered above the keys for a heartbeat. And then she reached to her side and pulled a folded piece of paper from her bag. She placed it carefully on the bench in front of her and stood. The movement was deliberate, calm, and yet it carried an unspoken weight. A ripple of whispers passed through the crowd. People craned their necks to see what was happening. "Did she just leave a note?" someone asked softly. Others nodded, curiosity mixed with hesitation. No one knew whether they should pick it up, read it aloud, or leave it for her. The woman at the piano had stepped back, watching them only with her quiet presence. Her expression unreadable. A young man, unable to resist, stepped forward and unfolded the note. He began to read aloud, his voice trembling slightly. "To whoever finds this," he said, "thank you for listening. This piano has been my companion through moments no one else could understand. Today, I play not for fame, not for applause, but to share what has lived inside me for so long. If my music reaches you, know that even in silence, you are never alone." The crowd was silent. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. People looked at one another, some blinking back tears, others simply frozen in disbelief. The note continued, and with each word, the emotional weight grew. "Life is fragile," the pianist's message read, "and sometimes the only way to speak is through sound. I have lost much, and yet I have found something greater connection. Listen, feel, remember, and carry a piece of this moment with you." A woman who had been recording the performance put down her phone, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. She whispered to her friend, I don't know who she is, but this is incredible. It's like she gave us a secret." Her friend nodded, unable to speak. Feeling the note as deeply as the music itself, the young boy from the playground, who had been sitting cross-legged on the grass, stared at the note in awe. He didn't fully understand all the words, but he felt them. Something about the way the paper rested there, simple and unassuming, made the message feel alive. He reached out to touch it gently, then pulled his hand back, respecting the invisible weight the woman had placed on it. The crowd began to murmur softly. Some spoke about their own lives, relating to what she had written. A man said, "I know what it feels like to be alone, to feel like no one could understand. Reading this, hearing her music, it's like she knows exactly how that feels." Another woman nodded. "And yet she doesn't dwell on sadness. She turns it into something beautiful. I can't stop crying." The pianist watched quietly from a short distance, her hands folded, her eyes reflecting both strength and vulnerability. She did not speak, but the weight of her presence was felt. Everyone sensed that she had lived a life of quiet struggle, moments of deep loss and intense longing, yet she had transformed those experiences into something that touched countless strangers. The note also contained a line that shocked the crowd. Though it was not shocking in a sensational sense, it was shocking in its honesty, its raw humanity. "I am leaving this here," it read, "because I cannot stay. Life has demanded my attention elsewhere. But know this, even if I am gone, the music remains, and the connection you feel is real. Don't let it fade." The words carried a strange finality, and yet, instead of despair, the crowd felt a sense of awe. A woman who had been quietly listening, her hands clasped in front of her, whispered, She's gone. And yet, she's right here in all of us." Her friend nodded, tears running freely now. People began to reflect, thinking about the moments in their own lives where connection had been rare or fleeting, where words had failed them, and where a small gesture like the music and the note could mean everything. The man sitting on the bench with the young boy from earlier leaned closer and said softly, "This is more than just music. This is a reminder of what really matters." The boy nodded, his small hand clutching a sketchbook where he had been drawing shapes inspired by the piano. The two of them shared a quiet, mutual understanding without needing words. Some people began to read the note again, loud this time, letting others hear the words. Each reading revealed something new, something personal to the listener. One woman said, "She's talking about hope. Even in the hardest times, we can find it," another added, "and about presence. About being here, really noticing the moment." The note, like the music, became a mirror. It reflected the feelings of those who read it, showing them something they might have overlooked in their busy lives. The pianist, meanwhile, gathered her things slowly, deliberately, giving the crowd a final chance to absorb what had happened. Her movements were calm, almost ritualistic, yet carried the same intensity that had been present in her playing. People held their breath as she closed the keyboard and placed it back into the worn case. The sound of the latch snapping shut, echoing softly in the quiet park as she walked away. The crowd remained in a stunned silence. Some people looked at the empty bench where she had been, trying to imagine the presence that had occupied it just moments before. Others spoke in hushed tones, sharing how the music and the note had affected them personally. A man said, "I feel like she gave me a gift I didn't even know I needed." A woman responded, "Exactly. It's like she knew exactly what to say without speaking a single word." The energy in the park shifted. Where there had been curiosity and admiration, there was now reflection and quiet connection. Strangers looked at one another differently, as if the shared experience of her music and words had created an unspoken bond. People who had arrived alone found themselves sitting beside others, talking softly about what they had felt, what the note had meant, what the music had made them remember. A young couple walked slowly through the crowd, holding hands. "I never expected this," the woman said. "Just a piano in the park, and yet I feel like everything in my day has changed." Her partner nodded, squeezing her hand gently. "It's like she reminded us what really matters. Even if we forget, even if life gets busy, it's still there." The note, now carefully placed on the bench for others to see, became a focal point. People came closer, leaning down to read it again, some taking photos, some simply holding it in their minds. It was a tangible reminder of something intangibly, of hope, presence, and the power of shared experience. Even the children, who had been mesmerized by the music, sensed the weight of what had happened. They spoke softly among themselves, sharing their feelings in the simple way only children can. "She made me feel happy and sad at the same time," one said. "I think she wanted us to feel everything." Another nodded, quietly agreeing. The day continued, but the energy in the park had shifted. People moved with a little more awareness, a little more care for one another. The mysterious pianist had left without a word, but her music and her note remained. They lingered in the air, in the minds and hearts of everyone who had witnessed them. What she had shared was not just a performance or a message, it was a reminder that even the smallest actions could touch lives in ways that were profound and lasting by the time the sun reached its peak. The park was quieter again. People began to leave slowly, carrying the memory of the music and the note with them. Conversations were subdued, thoughtful, and introspective. The fountain bubbled softly, the birds had returned to their singing, and the city's normal rhythm resumed, but something had shifted. Those who had been there knew that a moment of true human connection had occurred, one that could not be measured or repeated, but would be remembered. The bench stood empty now. The keyboard gone, but the folded note remained. It was simple, unassuming, yet it held a weight that no one could ignore. People stopped to glance at it one last time before moving on, some picking it up carefully, others photographing it. Every action felt deliberate, as if acknowledging the presence of someone extraordinary. Someone who had shared more than music, someone who had shared a piece of their soul. And as the crowd dispersed, leaving behind only footsteps and soft echoes of conversation, the impact of the music and the note lingered. People carried it with them into their lives, into their work, into their homes. Some would think of it years later, in moments of sadness or reflection, and remember the morning when a woman played piano on a park bench and left a note that shocked them not with scandal, but with honesty, vulnerability, and a reminder of the beauty in shared human experience. The park did not feel the same after she left. Even hours later, people still stood near the bench, staring at the empty space where the piano had been. Some spoke softly, others stayed quiet, as if afraid to break something fragile. The note remained there, carefully placed, guarded by an unspoken respect. No one dared to throw it away. It felt important, like a message meant for more than just one day. By the afternoon, the story had already begun spreading beyond the park. Videos of the woman playing and photos of the handwritten note appeared everywhere. People shared them with short captions like, "This changed my day," or "I can't stop thinking about her." Comments poured in from strangers who had never visited the park but felt moved just by watching on a screen. Some people returned to the park later that day, hoping she might come back. They stood near the bench, scanning every passing face. When the sun began to lower and she still had not appeared, a quiet disappointment settled in. Still, many stayed, sitting on the grass, talking with strangers about what they had felt that morning. A man who worked at a nearby office came back after his shift ended. He stood where he had stood earlier, hands in his pockets, staring at the bench. "I don't know why," he said to a woman beside him, "but it feels like I needed that today. Like really needed it." The woman nodded. "Me too. I feel lighter somehow, and sad, and grateful." All at once, the next morning, the park was crowded again, but this time it was different. People were not rushing through. Many came directly to the bench as if it had become a place of meaning. Someone had placed flowers there overnight. Another person had left a small candle, unlit. A few notes written on scraps of paper appeared beside the original one. Short messages, thank you notes, thoughts about hope. Words people had been holding inside for a long time. The original note was now protected inside a clear cover, placed there by someone who wanted to keep it safe from the wind. A small sign next to it read, "Please be respectful." Everyone was Park workers noticed the change too. One of them paused while sweeping nearby and said quietly to his coworker, "I've worked here for years. I've never seen people act like this. It's like the park has a heartbeat now." Local reporters arrived soon after. They interviewed people who had been there, asking what they saw, what they felt. No one could explain it clearly. "She didn't say anything," one woman said, "but it felt like she said everything." Another man added, "It wasn't just music. It felt personal, like she understood something about life that we all forget." The question everyone asked was the same. Who was she? People tried to piece together clues. Someone said she might be a teacher because of her calm patience. Another believed she had once played on big stages but chose to disappear. Others thought she was just someone who needed to be heard, even if only for a moment. No one knew the truth. Online, strangers began sharing their own stories in response to her note. People wrote about times they felt invisible, about moments when music, art, or a simple act of kindness had saved them from despair. A woman posted, "I played piano after losing someone I loved. I stopped when life got busy." Seeing her reminded me why I started. The bench became more than just a bench. It turned into a place where people slowed down. Some sat quietly. Others talked to strangers. A young person brought a notebook and began writing poems there. An older man brought a harmonica and played softly one evening, not for attention, but as a tribute. Still, everyone wondered if she would return. Days passed. Each morning, a few hopeful listeners arrived early. They waited, coffee cups in hand, eyes on the path. When she didn't appear, they sighed but stayed a while anyway. The memory alone felt worth returning for. One afternoon, a woman stood near the bench holding a printed photo of the pianist. She showed it to others, asking gently, Have you seen her around? People shook their heads. Some looked sad. Others smiled softly. No one person said, but I feel like she's still here. A school teacher brought her class to the park on a weekday morning. She read the note out loud to them in a calm voice. The children listened closely. When she finished, one child raised a hand and asked, "Why did she leave?" The teacher paused before answering. "Maybe," she said, "she wasn't meant to stay. Maybe she was meant to remind us of something, and then trust us to carry it forward." That answer stayed with many of them. The city eventually moved on, as cities always do. News cycles changed. New stories replaced old ones. But something quiet remained. People still visited the bench. Flowers continued to appear and disappear. The note was copied, shared, printed, but the original stayed protected where it was first placed. One evening, a woman sat alone on the bench as the sky turned orange. She had been there the day the pianist played. She closed her eyes and tried to remember the sound of the music. For a moment, she almost could. It felt like it was still in the air, waiting. She whispered to no one in particular, "I hope you're okay." Others felt the same. Wherever the pianist was, people hoped she had found peace or purpose or whatever she needed. No one felt angry that she left. Instead, they felt honored that she came at all. The mystery became part of the meaning. If they never knew her name, that was fine. If they never saw her again, that was okay too. She had given them something rare, a shared moment of honesty, a reminder that even in a busy world, one person could pause, play, and change the way strangers felt. And so the park carried on, different now, in a quiet way. People walked a little slower near the fountain. They listened more. Some smiled at strangers. Others sat longer on benches, thinking the woman with the piano was gone. But her presence remained, stitched into the space she had touched. Not loud, not dramatic, just real, and for many, that was enough. Time moved forward, as it always does. But the memory of that morning in the park did not fade. Weeks passed, then months, and still people spoke about the woman and her piano. The bench near the fountain had become a quiet landmark, not marked on maps, but remembered in hearts. People no longer came expecting to see her. They came because the place itself felt different now. One early morning, long after the story had stopped trending online, a man sat on the bench with a cup of tea in his hands. He had never met the pianist, never heard her play in person. He had only watched a video late one night when he couldn't sleep. Still, something about that spot drew him in. He sat there quietly, listening to the wind move through the trees, wondering how a stranger could leave such a deep mark without saying a single word. Nearby, a young woman opened a small notebook and began to write. She came often now. She said the bench helped her think, helped her breathe. She wrote about ordinary things, her work, her worries, her hopes, but being there made those thoughts feel lighter, like they had somewhere safe to land. The park returned to its normal rhythm, but not completely. People smiled more. They spoke more gently. Strangers sometimes exchanged quiet nods near the bench, as if acknowledging a shared secret. No one needed to explain it. One afternoon, a soft sound drifted through the air. Not a piano, but a violin. A young person stood near the fountain, playing slowly, carefully. The notes were not perfect, but they were honest. A small crowd formed, not because the sound demanded attention, but because it invited it. Someone whispered, "It's happening again." Another replied, "No, it never stopped." The note was no longer on the bench. After many weeks, it had been placed inside a small frame and moved to a nearby community center for safekeeping. A copy remained in the park, along with a simple message printed below it. Take a moment. Listen. Remember. People still paused to read it. Some touched the glass gently. Others closed their eyes after reading, as if letting the words sink in. No one ever discovered who the pianist was or where she went. Some believed she lived nearby and simply returned to a quiet life. Others thought she moved on to another city, another park, another bench. A few imagined she played once, left her message, and felt complete. The truth did not matter as much as the feeling she left behind. One evening, just as the sun began to set, a woman walked slowly through the park. She wore simple clothes and carried a small bag over her shoulder. She stopped near the fountain and stood there for a long moment, watching people sit, talk, laugh softly. She looked at the bench. Her eyes softened. She did not sit down. She did not speak to anyone. She simply watched. A child ran past her, laughing. A couple sat on the grass, sharing a quiet conversation. An older man closed his eyes, listening to the evening sounds. The woman took a deep breath. Whatever she had come looking for, she seemed to find it in that moment. She turned and walked away before anyone noticed her. The bench remained worn but steady. It held the weight of countless thoughts now. People came there when they felt lost, overwhelmed, or simply curious. Some brought music. Others brought silence. Both were welcome. Years later, the story was told differently depending on who spoke it. Some said the pianist saved them during a hard time. Others said she reminded them of someone they loved. A few said she changed nothing, but somehow everything felt different afterward. The truth was simpler. She reminded people to feel, to pause, to listen, and that was enough. On an ordinary morning, long after most had stopped expecting miracles, the park looked just like any other. The fountain flowed. The trees swayed. The bench sat quietly. And yet, for those who knew, it was never just an ordinary place again, because once a woman played piano on a park bench, and she left something behind that could never be taken away.